Shopify grows your business no matter how far or big you grow. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Whether you're selling your fans' next favorite shirt or an exclusive piece of podcast merch, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. Allbirds, Rothy's, Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow, grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg, and I'm your host of Yoga Birth Babies. And today we're going to talk about parenting a child with special needs and disability, a neurodiverse child specifically. While I understand disabilities and special needs can also fall under physical disabilities, this conversation is geared more towards the unseen disability of a neurodiverse child. And in full disclosure, as I talk about throughout this conversation, this is a life in which I live. My son has complex ADHD. And it's something that when I had the opportunity to speak to our speaker today, I jumped at because honestly, it felt really great to have an open, supportive conversation with someone who's in that world. We go through so much in this conversation about, first of all, my guest is Susanna Peace Lovell. I'll tell you a little about her in a minute. We talk about Susanna's whole journey as a parent with a child with special needs. We talk about getting support for that, how to get care providers on board, the different resources, how to be an advocate for your child, how to get the resources through schools to support, and the emotional side of parenting a child with special needs and disabilities. So I think if you are a parent that's experiencing this, you're going to get a lot out of this. And if you're in the periphery of someone that does parent a child with disabilities and special needs, this might also give you some support of how to support them to understand the world in which they live. Let me tell you a little bit about my guest, Susanna. So she received her BA from UC Berkeley and is an author, speaker, and disability rights advocate and a certified professional life coach dedicated to the health and wellness of disability families everywhere. This is also her lived experience raising a teenage daughter with a myriad of disabilities and diagnoses, including ASD, autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, anxiety, and severe food allergies. I really enjoyed my conversation with Susanna, and I think you will too. Now, before we get to that conversation, I always love to give updates about what's happening at PYC. So we just celebrated our 22nd birthday. It's wild to me, and I'm so proud of the journey that Prenatal Yoga Center has gone on. I'm going to be honest, I'm proud of my journey of being on that experience of literally getting the keys when I was in my late 20s and be like, oh my gosh, I guess I'm going to open a yoga studio, and seeing how it's grown in these 22 years and the families, the thousands and thousands of families that have come through PYC, and that I'm still in touch with some of those families. It's a joy, and I appreciate all those that have been part of the community in the past, part of the community now, and part of the community in the future. Thank you for showing up and supporting us and making us what we are. So I just wanted to take that moment and express that. And thank you for listening and being part of this community. With that, we are still plowing into the summer, and we still have our classes online 7 days a week, which has been amazing to work with people from all over. And we've got classes in studio 6 days a week. We've got our workshops. We've got our teacher training. It's something that keeps growing, and it's exciting to see where it's going. So I think that's enough of me. What's next? I guess we'll just get to the podcast. So we're going to take a super quick break. And when we come back, please enjoy my conversation with Susanna.
Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Hi, Susanna. How are you?
Hi, Deb. I'm doing well today. How are you?
I'm doing really great. I mean, in full disclosure, both my kids are in camp, so I'm just thrilled.
I
Got a little space.
I just exhaled with you. Yeah.
Well, I'm really excited for this podcast. I don't remember how you came across my desk, but when I saw what you speak about, it really resonated with me. So we're going to talk about special needs and disabilities. And in full disclosure also, I have a son that has some disabilities and special needs. He has ADHD and really a very complex level of it. So I feel like I can really relate to a lot of what you've shared in the past from your other podcasts and just from reading about you. So I'm really excited to hear your perspective and all the support you're going to offer parents. But I guess before we get into that, I'd love to learn more about you and your own journey as a parent of a child with special needs.
Yeah. So, well, I have somehow survived 18 years so far of raising my daughter. She is now technically a legal adult that she likes to remind me about. And I say survive because it has been a very sort of bumpy, up and down, unexpected journey all around for me. As you know, even just as a mother, becoming a mother is such a huge transition that we just don't actually honor enough, I don't think. And so my journey has been, like I said, very unexpected. Lots of twists and turns that I wasn't aware were coming my way, even as I thought I was so prepared to be a mother. I felt like, I had tons of siblings, I have lots of nieces and nephews. I've been around kids and children and families my whole life, like very, very, very intricately, like just babysitting and, just really having so much experience from a very young age, really. And so I just thought I knew what motherhood was going to be like for me. And I had this perfect vision, of what it was going to be like. And quite soon after I became a mother, I realized, this is not what I thought it was going to be. So the journey of being a parent to a child with myriad disabilities and special needs. And I will say that initially it really started off with finding out that my daughter, whose name is Arizona, had lots of food allergies. And so that was sort of step number one of just jumping into an altered experience of motherhood,
Yeah. I have friends that their kids have food allergies, and it can really be a full-time job figuring out, especially if it's severe and multiple, what can they eat, what can't they eat, can they go out to eat, is the kitchen really responsible?
Yeah.
Like it's really, I've seen the stress that they've undergone.
Yes. It continues still. I mean, a lot of times doctors and professionals will say, oh, she'll grow out of some things and she'll grow out of, whatever, things are going to get better. And, she has grown out of some allergies, but the ones that she has are still severe to the point that it does absolutely manipulate our lives. Like we have to organize and rearrange our lives around food and access to food that she can eat. So yeah, it's part of the journey that is now just like, it's just part of my everyday, I live it in my bones.
Yeah. And I can hear the exhaustion, or maybe it's, I can relate to the exhaustion.
Yeah.
This has been quite the year for us. So I can relate to that exhaustion, which we'll talk later about how to turn some of that energy back to yourself. Because one thing I think you'll share, and I've experienced, is having a child that requires so much attention is depleting and can affect the whole family.
Oh, yes, 1000%. Yeah, for sure. A ripple effect for sure.
So let's talk about your book, Your True Self is Enough. So you openly talk about your battle with postpartum anxiety and depression. Can you share about this since I think it would be supportive for other parents to relate to?
Yeah, I'm so glad we can have this conversation. I still do not feel like we have it enough. And certainly when I became a mother 18 years ago, there was really very little resource out there for support for postpartum anxiety and depression. So yeah, I will say that I didn't realize growing up that I did suffer from anxiety. I just thought it was stress. I thought it was my type A personality. I thought it was just the way that I was raised in terms
Mhm.
of uh, having to meet high standards at every front. And so I didn't realize that anxiety was part of my profile already. So once I became a mother and then my hormones, were all over the place. And then I had a child who commanded tons and tons of attention from like the second she was born. She cried a lot, incessantly. It was like nothing could soothe her. She cried for the first 18 months of her life.
Ugh.
And so that anxiety just heightened to a point where I couldn't access sleep and for myself. So even though I was, prepared to not sleep well and have disrupted sleep as a new mother to a newborn, I didn't realize that when she was finally able to sleep, that I would not be able to sleep. So it was this weird relationship with sleep. And I, was so anxious every time I tried to lay down to sleep about what if I didn't hear her when she woke up? What if she needed me and I wasn't able to get to her because I was asleep? And so I just I couldn't sleep. My heart was racing, palpitating, I was sweating. And after a couple of weeks of not sleeping a wink, I fell into a very, very scary and deep and dark and debilitating episode of depression that I had never experienced before in my entire life. And so the word that comes to me was just, I was so scared. I was so afraid. I was like, I don't know. I don't know what this feeling is. And now I have this young little being that I am 100% responsible for in terms of like, I was, breastfeeding her exclusively and just, yeah, it was very, very rough. And for the first time in my life, I actually had to really seek out help, which was not comfortable for me, not normal for me, not familiar to me. And it was a long, long road of getting the exact help that I needed. Again, lots of ups and downs, lots of twists and turns that were unexpected. And ultimately and finally, I found a regimen of a mixture of, holistic uh, aid, for example, acupuncture. I had a holistic chiropractor, also modern medicine, Western medicine, medications for helping me settle. Initially, doctors were just trying to treat the sleep aspect of it, and that wasn't the route. So that didn't work, and it was just a very, very, very debilitating journey. And I'm so grateful that I made it through. I made it through that period.
Thank you for sharing that. And I really wanted you to speak that because I think there are so many other parents that experience this and often feel alone in it or ashamed in it. And I just want there to be lifted any stigma and recognize the community that's supporting them and that this is not particularly uncommon. In fact, I believe the statistics for PMADS, perinatal mood anxiety
Mm,
disorder, is
mhm,
reported 1 in 5, but
mhm.
that's only reported. So we have to
Right.
think about all those that are not. So thank you for
Yeah.
being open and vulnerable and sharing that.
Mhm, mhm,
Let's shift back to a little bit more of the special needs and the disabilities. And as I was prepping for this, I started to think about being a parent like that. And it's almost like an unseen disability in a sense
mm,
for neurodiverse kids than it might be
mm,
like a physical disability. And
mhm,
one thing that occurred to me, it's like when my child would get dysregulated
Mhm.
and have whatever type of tantrum. And I'm not talking toddler,
Yeah.
I'm talking a little older kid. I'd
Yes.
often feel judged, and I put this in quotes, like the bad parent.
Yes.
So, and I honestly, this was even by like family. So
Yeah. Of
I
course.
would love, because it's unseen, like neurodiversity is finally getting some light, but it's different than a physical, disability.
Mhm.
So can you talk more about
Mhm.
the culture and
Mhm.
disabilities, and how does culture play into the experience of
Mhm.
disabilities
Mhm.
within a family?
Oh, Deb, I love this question. You are speaking my language to a T. It's making me feel so much less alone. So I appreciate
Oh,
that.
thank you.
And especially, no, you hit on a very good point here, which is, when our children are acting out, right? When they have to express um, a feeling, right? Because they can't hold it in their body, or there's an impulsivity control issue, right?
That
Or,
that is the family I live in. The yes, my son has very high
right.
impulse and very low frustration tolerance.
Right. And when they're not 2 or 3 years old, it's very frowned upon.
Yeah.
And so, and especially if you're out in public. Okay. So I know that you will understand what I'm saying when, our child might have a moment, an expression, a big, huge feeling. My daughter Arizona will often have, sort of physical manifestations of just like stomping and biting her hand, and so many other things, along with the very loud voice volume of screaming, something that seems so like minor compared to what happened. But now, as an 18-year-old, right, out in public, having a big loud worry and outburst is so jarring to people. It's just, people will automatically just turn around and sort of side eye, or just kind of frown, or like, what's your issue? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Me, what's my issue as the parent?
Right.
Right? That's what I mean. Not like, oh, wow, I have so much compassion for that mother and that child, young adult now, really, like, who is having some big feelings and is not able to find regulation in this moment. It's automatically this judgment from parents and outsiders. And so, yeah, I handle things differently, if I'm going to be quite honest, when we're in public than when we're at home. When we're at home, I feel like we have more time to sort of process and regulate and sit down and, talk about what's happening, or, squeeze something that feels good, or give her a big squeeze, or have her jump on her bouncy ball, whatever it is. In
Hmm.
public, it's like, okay, you know, let's nip this in the bud right now. And that, I also know that for my daughter, that is just sort of a band-aid on a very big wound.
Hmm.
So it's really hard in the moment to figure out exactly what to do. But I just feel like, we are just now starting to have these conversations in terms of awareness and honoring and, including, but to a point where someone might feel like they actually belong.
Hmm.
And so I love that we are now speaking up more about neurodiversity. I'm so grateful for this conversation, everywhere we can possibly have it, in the workplace, at schools, even amongst our, like you mentioned, like just even amongst our family members. Here's kind of what is going on. Let me just sort of explain what's happening. And here's, the steps we're taking to find some regulation and to
Yeah.
honor feelings. Yeah.
I just had to have a conversation with my mom, like literally like 2 weeks ago, about my son. So he has, and we can talk more about the different types of this, but he has what I believe is called complex or combo ADHD. So there's the hyperactive and inattentive, and he's got both, which has a myriad of awesome traits. And
Mhm.
so I was explaining that to my mom. She's like, "Oh, he just needs a few good wins." And I'm like, "No, it's
Mhm.
more than that."
Mhm.
And she honestly, while she understood, she's like, "Yeah, there's this thing, ADHD." She really just thought it was like a learning thing. And
Mhm.
so we had to have a conversation about the different traits of that. And this is someone who has been hearing me talk about it for years. So can you explain just what, when we say neurodiverse, what does that cover? Like what, maybe it's all the different, I guess, diagnoses or labels, maybe? What do you, however you want to
Yeah. Well, it's a very, very huge spectrum.
It really is. I know. I'm like, how are we going to cover that?
So, but really, it has everything to do with the way that your brain processes information that is potentially different than what we would consider to be sort of neurotypical, which this is such a general conversation. I mean, there are so many different aspects to a neurotypical person that might be on the verge of maybe some divergence. You know what I mean? There's so many different ups and downs, but certainly there are so many different components, the processing piece of it, sensorial input for sure, ways of connecting sensory to feeling, meaning like, having to connect sort of physical manifestations to an emotional feeling or a trauma or a memory. Or, when Arizona was first diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5, one of the doctors sort of so brilliantly explained it to me in layman terms in that her brain is like, it's almost like it's like a freeway with traffic jams and on ramps and off ramps. And so there's so many different things crossing paths and the lights aren't working. And, it wasn't like a fun picture to imagine, but it was very clear. And it was, sort of relayed to me in a very loving, understanding place so that I could have compassion for my child. So I could understand my child a little bit more, have some more compassion for my child. And instead of just being so like angry and upset about these outward behaviors, it turned more into a conversation of like, wow, good to know. Good to know. Tell me more, Arizona, tell me more about what's going on. And before she was able to speak so clearly and articulately, she could bite her hand, and I would say, you're really frustrated. I would just be constantly narrating to her what she was doing with her body, how she was moving around. I see that you're pacing. Oh, I see that you're really frustrated. You're really worried. You're having a worry, everything that I could think of to just like sort of try to be in the moment with her. Anyway, I know that I am not fully answering your question, but I am trying to explain how it, was able to be understood by me. And I am so grateful for the opportunities that we do get a chance to speak to, and especially to our loved ones. I've had so many conversations with my family. My father is Taiwanese, so I'm mixed Taiwanese. My mother is American. And so even there, culturally, there are so many differences and understandings and translations of what neurodiversity means. So I remember, I spent all my summers in Taiwan. And so I remember wanting to bring Arizona back home to Taiwan for the first time. And my dad was like, yeah, no, that's not a good idea. And I was like, ouch. Wait, what do you mean? And he was like, nobody's going to understand her, and it was such a punch in the gut. And it wasn't, said in a place that was unloving or unkind. He was just like, no one's going to understand her. And so I said, you know what, let me shift this narrative. Let me shift the conversation. And I started speaking to my family in Taiwan and, trying to explain what autism was, and ADHD and everything else. And there was not like an exact translation for the word autism back then, and it was fascinating. Now there is so much more information, but they were like, oh, autism. Oh, okay. So that's when someone can't connect with anybody around them and is just sort of like sitting in the corner on their own, doing their own thing. And I was like, yeah, no, that's actually not my child, So yeah.
And it is a broad spectrum, and it's even changed, it's through decades. I remember at one point it was called Asperger's. Now it's called being on the spectrum. Like, I like that it's expanding and that it's more, that it covers more. So we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, let's start to think about how to support a family who just received a disability diagnosis. So we're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
You purr at me and I feel complete. Then you come at me like the Wolverine. And even though you often turn your back on me, our love goes deeper than a submarine. No, I don't want clay dust inside of you, or chemicals in the place you poo. In my arms or in your box, our love will be pure. World's best cat litter for the world's best cat.
Okay, we're back. So I know you work along with families to support disabilities. So how would you support a family who just received a disability diagnosis of their child? What advice would you offer them?
Mm-hmm. So the first thing I would probably say is I would check in with them, so tell me more. Like, how are you feeling? The mom, the dad, whoever wants to participate in the conversation, and just sort of lean into the individual, the parents' sort of feelings, the big feelings, the reactions, and try to uncover a little bit about those worries. And then jumping into, okay, so let's talk about the diagnosis. And we talk about typically the journey to, a lot of times I'm with a family as they're just discovering an actual diagnosis or a label for their child, right? And other times I am, people are referred to me after they just received a diagnosis. So either way, we talk about the journey along the way. And then we talk about, who our child is, right? So we talk about, like, say the child's name is Matt. Okay. So we have this child, Matt. Let's talk about Matt. And we just talk about, well, Matt is this and that and this, and, sort of like the characteristics and the qualities that Matt embodies, wow, he finds so much joy when blank, he lights up so much about. So when we start talking about the child, and we're all, leaning into this conversation, right? And in sort of this energy of like curiosity and awe and wondering about this being, we really get to the point where we're like, yeah, and so this individual who came through you in whatever way they came through you, whether it was through adoption or whether it was through, natural birth or whatever it was, right? Surrogate. This is a child who is whole and complete and perfect. They are whole, complete, perfect being. They are perfectly intact soul, right? And they came here to be able to express their light and love and beingness to the rest of the world. I mean, they are here as a human being right now on this earth in this expression. This is their form. And so we really start with like honoring our children for exactly who they are, leaning into sort of what makes them tick, what, again, like what brings them joy. And there's always something, we might not be able to like access it right away. Like, I don't know, I'm so miserable all the time. And it seems like my child is so miserable all the time. And there are moments where they are definitely living in their full expression, right? So we lean into those moments. And then that conversation also shifts to embrace the parent, honoring ourselves for exactly who we are. Wow. Having so much compassion for ourselves. I just feel like it is just this journey. It's such an opportunity for awakening as the entire family, the siblings, the parents, the extended family. And so it is for sure a parallel journey. And it will be, continuing forward at all the different stages.
I like that. I like that you're first putting, look at this child. Your child's not broken. He's whole. He's perfect, because it could feel like, oh, what is this I have to deal with? But really seeing the person. I really like that.
Yes.
That really resonates with me. So let's talk about resources, because that's not always easy to get. OTs, PTs, whatever, therapists. So how did you get support and resources from your care providers to help you with your child with special needs?
Yeah, well, it was a journey, and it's actually still sort of a journey because there are different options, at different, ages and different stages of development. So I will say that it is sort of an ongoing journey. And so we just have to sort of roll up our sleeves and be prepared for that.
Yeah.
I think what is most important for families to know is that you're going to be starting off as your child's biggest advocate for sure.
Definitely. Oh my gosh,
Right?
absolutely.
Yes. And you know your child the best, right? And, in my experience, I had to be quite tenacious in terms of I remember calling my pediatrician, and I only called my pediatrician because one of my siblings who had a child at the time already was like, Susanna, something's different about Arizona. I'm not really sure what it is, but there's something different. And I think you should get that checked out. And I just knew she was right. Like, that gut feeling that we have
Hmm.
as parents. And so I was like, well, what do okay, but who do I call? I didn't even know, and she was like, call your pediatrician, start there. And I did. And he just sort of poo-pooed the whole thing. He was just like, well, I don't understand what your problem is. She's talking, she has words, and I was like, yeah, but she doesn't connect. Like, she's talking in the other room. You know what I mean? Like, she's not talking to me. She's not talking to anyone. Her play seems different. I had to really start observing my child. And so I had to be very, very tenacious. I really had to be like a squeaky wheel, but in a very sort of like, I need your help kind of, energy, as opposed to, being enraged that no one's paying attention to me. I really was like,
Right.
I really need your help. I really need your help. I'm so worried. I'm so concerned. I don't know what's going on. Finally, the doctor finally gave me a referral to a developmental pediatrician. And so I was able to get in the door there, but I still had to wait, months. And so I kept calling and calling to see if there were any openings or cancellations. And then in the meantime, I was getting referrals to educational sort of developmental people who weren't doctors. I was just trying to get as many answers as I could. And then ultimately I got in with the developmental pediatrician, and that really started the moving forward of the warrior mom, as I'm sure you are familiar with, in terms
Yeah.
of, okay, this is going to be really assistful and helpful for her. Speech therapy, occupational therapy, go, 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 go. Right. And so getting all the pieces together was absolutely a full-time job. And just leaning into that as the touch point, ultimately being referred to the regional center that we have here. Westside Regional Center is where my daughter is a client and still is. She is now transitioning to adulthood because she just turned 18. And so I just had to ask so many questions. I called so many people. I showed up at offices. If people weren't answering the phone, I just showed up at the front desk. This was, obviously well before COVID, when we could do this. And I just was like, I really need your help. And I just asked everyone I could. I asked the other moms and dads that were in the waiting areas of the therapy centers, hey, you guys, I'm just wondering about this, and I just felt like, let me find my tribe. And then obviously, as Arizona has grown older, her therapy needs have changed. And so it's just utilizing all of those, tools that I had to hone back
Yeah.
then, in terms of just advocating for my daughter, you know?
Yeah. I found the school system actually was
Mm,
helpful. So when my son was almost 4, now a little of the background is I'm dyslexic, and I had assumed that my kids would be. Actually, my daughter is, but my son was not. But I was convinced he was. And so he was like a week away from turning 4. And so I think I just called the New York public education and got an appointment for him to get evaluated. And while he wasn't dyslexic, he did qualify for OT, for fine motor skills, and I think low muscle tone. And so they gave us OT 3 times a week, completely paid for by New
Great.
York public education.
Right.
And then when we moved to New Jersey, I was able to take that through. But by continuously advocating,
Mhm.
he was able to continue his services and get other services. But I really had to be a squeaky wheel.
Yes.
But I did find the
Yes.
school system was very helpful for those things. I don't know if that's everywhere, but that's where I started.
You know what? I'm glad you mentioned that, because we have had a beautiful experience with the public school system here in Los Angeles. It was a little bumpy in the beginning, but ultimately, it's still where I have my daughter in school. We have been so supported. Resources have been flowing to us in that way. But it did require some grit in the
Oh,
beginning.
definitely.
Like, oh, well, no, she doesn't need a one-to-one aid because, we'll just do a functional behavior analysis when she shows up on the first day. And I was like, yeah, well, with all due respect, we will not be here on the first day without a one-to-one behaviorist, because that's what she needed. I knew that for a fact. And so, yeah, so there were a couple little battles along the way.
Oh,
But
don't get me wrong. It wasn't like not
great.
everything handed, but I certainly, once I pushed, like there was a program in his middle school that I'm like, this is the program he needs. And they're like, oh, I don't think so. I'm like, no, you don't understand. But once we got the services really helped.
Yes. So grateful, right? So grateful.
Yeah. So what mistakes, because I look back at my journey, I'm like, oh, so many. But what mistakes have you made on your parenting journey that you think others can learn from?
I mean, so many mistakes. I can't even count how many mistakes, but I will say, honestly, if I could sort of go back and talk to my younger self, I would just beg myself to have so much compassion for myself and so much compassion for my child in the moments where it just feels impossible. I feel like I have been so impatient. I have acted out so much in response to my child's behaviors without really knowing and understanding how to support her.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like the mistakes that I have made have been mostly to be so reactive, but really in terms of moments that have made me feel uncomfortable. So I have really tried so hard and tried to be so conscious around all the times where I have been in uncomfortable situations, usually out in public. My daughter's having an outburst, and I just react in a way that feels so unconscious,
Mm-hmm.
And, oftentimes I will go back and apologize and wow, I'm realizing that I was, in a state, I was experiencing sensory overload because the lights were so bright in the Target or, the music was loud and I didn't get much sleep last night. And so all of those things, really compounded into me feeling very, very impatient in the moment. And I will try to go back and, sort of smooth it over or process it through. I'm a human being. Mommy's a human being too. And I was having a moment also. Sounds like I have big feelings too that I need to process. But I really do feel like, I wish that I could have been more present and conscious in all the moments where I could have, processed things better for myself, given myself a minute, counting in my head,
Mm-hmm.
the count of 3, taking a breath inside and then responding. It's, yeah, I will forever be making quote mistakes, in this parenting journey. So
Yeah, I feel I can very much relate. And it's funny that as you were speaking in my head, I came back to the bad parent. Like that's immediately what popped in my head is that I didn't even have, when I've had reactions, it wasn't even as if some other person was in the room judging me. It was me thinking about how maybe like one of my friends who does not have a neurodiverse child would react to how I'm either reacting or not reacting or how my child is behaving. And so like I'm judging if you can follow that convoluted thinking.
Absolutely. 100%.
And I have found my reactions at those times almost worse because I'm almost like I'm correcting them from the point of view of a friend who's not even there.
Yes.
And so I try to catch myself on that.
Yes.
And re-regulate myself because I'm getting dysregulated by what's happening. So those are things that I will fess up to as mistakes that I've made that I hope others can learn from as well.
Yeah. No, it's so good. There are so many voices in our head all the time,
They really are.
They make life so much more complicated than they need to be.
So,
So,
what would you say to the parent who's afraid to pursue a diagnosis for their child or just afraid of the possibility that their child might have a disability or disabilities and yeah,
mhm.
let's leave it at that.
Yeah, and I've come across so many families that are very, afraid for different reasons. And so I'll start with the individual who's afraid, the parent who's afraid. Tell me more, tell me why. Right. And it's often a very, very layered conversation that will get to a root that has mostly nothing to do with the child and mostly having to do with the own unmet needs and wounds of the actual parent. I'm just worried about da da da. I just don't want my child to be labeled because da da da. Because
Yeah.
and if we take it down to those layers, like really doing the deep, deep work, we'll realize that it's not so much about the child. I like to always talk about the possibility, and the options that are available to those that have like a specific diagnosis. Well, no, it doesn't matter to me because, I'll just pay out of pocket for any therapies they need, but I just don't want a diagnosis. But I also don't want therapists to have records. So I'm going to have them sign it's a lot of energy around trying to meet some sort of like inner child wound, really, usually.
Hmm.
That's usually what it always comes down to. So I just always like to have a very sort of neutral conversation and, share anecdotal stories about how, this has been so, these doors were open to us because of this
Hmm.
diagnosis. We were able to receive this amount of funding to allow for because of this diagnosis. My daughter was able to receive the support in her school environment where she, and I'll give examples of ways in which she was really able to benefit and thrive. If other clients have given me the permission to share their stories, I do, because that can be assistful and helpful too, in terms of like, I'm raising a daughter. I might have a client who's worried about their son. And I have other clients who are like, oh, please share whatever you need to share about my journey with my son with your clients if you find that it can be supportive and helpful. And so that has been such a blessing and a gift for sure.
Yeah, I like that you bring up kind of how others have benefited. One of my close friends, her son was maybe like 4 years ago, diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And she said, she's like, it opened up so many services and insurance is covering it where they were paying out of pocket before. So she's like, bring on the services. We will take them.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. I know it's like a both. And by the way, it's also okay to have sort of like this both and feeling,
Yes.
It's
Yes.
like I'm so nervous and afraid and worried. Absolutely understandable, And I'm so excited to receive support. Yeah, so we can hold both of those at the same time and we often do.
Yeah. I mean, for myself, I was very I was having big feelings about
Yeah.
the experience the behavior my son was experiencing. This was years ago before we got the ADHD diagnosis. And I actually was kind of, as I'm thinking about this, I was that parent that was a little afraid, but at the same time, when we received it, it felt like, okay, now I understand why. And there was a little bit more material about like, this is the way that kids with ADHD think. So I'm like, oh, okay, I can
Mhm.
understand the greater whole. And there was sadness. I'll
Yeah,
be really open about that to be like,
yes, yes.
huh, okay, so this is also the path that he has ahead of him. Like, so was relief and
Mhm.
acceptance
Mhm.
that happened at the same time.
Yes. Yes. Yes, yes, yes.
So let's talk about the incredible depletion, maybe I'm just speaking for myself, that one can feel of raising a child with a disability. Because as I mentioned, it's a whole family thing, but it might just be my family dynamics. But I'm kind of the ringleader in a lot of organization and appointments and just the household. And it's exhausting. It is just exhausting. Like my
Yes.
son had a really hard time in school this year. And
Mhm.
my husband and I were just talking about I feel like I have like a post-traumatic stress response to the phone ringing during the school day. And I'm like, it's
Yes.
camp. We haven't
Yes.
had any calls from camp, but like, it's emotionally and physically depleting.
Yes.
So
Yes.
how do you support yourself and care
Mhm.
for yourself? And I know you have something called soul care. What
Mhm.
would that look like?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, first of all, yes, Deb, I am super exhausted. I feel depleted on most days. That doesn't mean that I am unable to access joy and, purpose and fulfillment in my life. I just feel like I've been fighting this good fight for many, 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 many years. And again, it's the unexpected, what's going to happen today. I'm not sure. I don't know what feelings are going to come up. I don't know what's going to happen, right? Um, with my child. So, yeah, I feel like I always have to start, with my hand on my heart. Like literally, I have to sit down with my hand on my heart and just say to myself, take a breath and say to myself, it is so understandable why you are so tired, why you feel so alone, why you are feeling isolated, why you are feeling overwhelmed, you know, um, and then to turn toward myself, just so much compassion, like, I have so much compassion for you, Susanna. I see you. I see how you are just, unrelenting in your motherhood experience, and the way that you are parenting Arizona, is just so, you are so trying to be as intentional and conscious and honoring of her at every turn, and also being mindful of now knowing that you need to be honored too. Right, your needs need to be met as well while you are running around and scrambling and making all of these homemade meals from scratch because of her allergies and all of these things. Yeah, so I start with acknowledging myself, having self compassion, and then leaning into, okay, so what does, and I actually say this to myself every single morning, and sometimes multiple times throughout the day, which is, okay, so what does self care look like for me today? And when I say soul care, I am referring to, self care is sort of a term that is very hip these days. We're all talking about self care. Maybe that might seem like yoga or a massage or whatever, what have you. For me, the real sort of self care, real soul care is sort of what does my inner self, like, what do I need at my core? How do I need to feel today? What are the qualities that I need to be present with me today, And
Hmm.
so that might look like so many different things depending on the day. Sometimes, it's like I just am going to sit in my office, my home office with the door shut for 10 minutes after we have this conversation, Deb, before I like
Hmm.
go back into the household chaos.
Yeah.
Or I am going to take a walk for 30 minutes before my next client, or I am not going to answer the phone call of the friend who I know is just going to want to be talking about themselves for 30 minutes, even though I love my dear friend, love her, just don't have the bandwidth today.
Yeah.
And, maybe I need to just pull out my journals and write furiously in them for 15 minutes. It's just literally every moment I'm like, okay, so what does self care look like for me this afternoon, or what does it look like for me this evening after Arizona goes to bed? So yeah, I'm telling you, sometimes surviving is a feat, and I think that we just need to acknowledge ourselves. It's not like woe is me, I'm having a horrible day, or maybe we are having a horrible day and we need to just say, let me just survive through this day and we'll start again tomorrow.
Yeah.
But for sure, we should not be so, hard on ourselves that we didn't do any self-care today, like it shouldn't be another, thing that we need to add to our to-do checklist, right? It
But
just,
you made it so digestible. Like, what I really like what you said is like, it could be 10 minutes before you pick up the next task. I'm confident we can all find 5 to 10 minutes somewhere. Like, I feel like I'm crazy busy moment to moment, but I know that when I really need, I can do a quick 5-minute meditation, and that can, or even go downstairs and do, it sounds silly, but I like foam rolling releases a lot for me. So
Mm,
I will do
yes.
chest opening foam rolling for
So
like 5-10 minutes. And that is my self-care, or for
Mm,
me, it is yoga too.
mm,
But these
mhm.
little, and it doesn't have to be, as much as I have been wanting a massage the last 2 months, it, it
Mhm.
keeps being pushed further on my calendar. It doesn't have to be a grandiose act. It can be something small. It could be just a few breaths,
Yes.
like
Yes.
conscious,
Yes.
mindful.
Yes. Yes. Right. Because we might only have, access to 3 breaths in a particular moment, but it's just that energy and intention around those 3 breaths,
Yeah.
right? I'm gonna, I'm ready for a reset,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this. Okay, we're going to take another break. When we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents? We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. So, you have several hats. You are a parent, you work with other parents. What hat are you going to put on to answer this question? What is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents?
Well, I will, again, this is something that is resonating with me right now today. So I'm going to share this with you all, which is that everything is going to be okay. And I'm saying that because it might feel like absolutely nothing is okay. Everything is very not okay. Nothing will ever be okay, because this is going to be my lived experience for the rest of, or, the next 10 years or 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, whatever. Um, but I absolutely believe that in every moment, in every situation, every circumstance, there is an option, there's an offering for us to, have and experience some form of awakening to ourselves. And so that's what I mean by everything is going to be okay. Everything is okay. It might feel uncomfortable, it might feel hard right now in this moment, and everything is okay. So I just, want every parent to be able to lean into the possibility of, what is here for them, through these experiences,
Uh-huh.
and, sort of just ask for that, seek that out, right? So what's in this for me? What am I here to learn?
I like that. Where can people find your work?
So I have, a website that is my first, middle, last name.com. So I'll say it and then I'll spell it. It's SusannaPeaceLovell.com, SusannaPeaceLovell.com. And so I have links to everything on there. I have an online course that I offer for empowering special needs families to create a thriving life. I have a link to my book. You can also find my book on Amazon under my last name, Susanna Peace Lovell. Your True Self is Enough: Lessons Learned on My Journey Parenting a Child with Autism. I am also on Instagram at Mama Peace, MAMAPEACE. And I'm very accessible, and I'm so here to be supportive to this beautiful community of mine.
Thank you, Susanna. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. It felt wonderful to talk to another parent who gets it, but then also I'm so appreciative of your open and honest conversation for those parents that are on this journey, as well as, the people that are not, so they can
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
understand kind of the bigger picture. So when they do meet someone that's neurodiverse, there is a little more compassion. So I just appreciate all you're offering.
Yeah. Thank you for this platform, Deb.
Thank you.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.
Step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather, now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.